This is a leaf spot disease problem that we were talking about. All kinds of other diseases as well can be a problem when we start shortcutting our potash. One of the things that I've started advocating to all of our producers to do is, especially if they're serious about commercial hay production, is to periodically go out and sample their hay fields for standing yield and take a sample there to determine the tissue analysis, the tissue value of these, particularly if we start seeing some bad zones show up versus some good zones. This is especially important if we're troubleshooting an issue. We oftentimes talk with our county agents about how do we go about troubleshooting problems like this. The key here is to take 20 similar specimens from a representative area. So you've got this grass out here. What you want to do is take your hand, and from the bottom of your fist to the top of your thumb is about 6 inches on most folks. Go out there and grab hold of the grass, slide it up until you get to the very tip end of the grass with the top end of your thumb. Clip that off in about 20, 30 different locations in your hayfield prior to, about a week prior to your second cutting of the year. Okay? And what you're looking for in that analysis, there will be a percent of each of these different nutrients, and the main one that we're looking at here is going to be tissue K. We want that tissue K analysis to be 2.0% or greater. All right? If it is in that range, then we are good when it comes to potash. All right, so that's to avoid a situation like this. Well, what do we do if we're trying to regenerate this field or reclaim this field in a situation where we have low P or low K in this field? Well, this is some more research that was done by Texas A&M. Some great soil fertility work done there over the years. They initially started out with a stand rating of a 4. That's 40% stand in this field. So they went for about 3 years here of providing it no potash, a marginal amount of potash, and then a recommended rate of potash. 200 pounds was the recommended amount they needed to put out there in this particular field. So they started out with a 40%. When no potash, they dropped below 20%. With a marginal amount of potash, they were able to increase that up to about a 65% stand after about 3 years. And then they got where they actually were putting out the right amount of potash here, and they were able to reclaim that to greater than a 90% stand in 3 years. If we look at putting out 200 pounds of potash here, for 3 to 4 years, we're looking at between $300 and $450 per acre is what it's going to cost us during those 3 to 4 years. Now, how does that compare to going back and resprigging the field? Well, resprigging a field, this day and age, a minimum of about $450. That's a minimum. Most of the time, it's probably going to be more than that if you really were to count up all your costs. So if we can reclaim that field, it would be best to do that. However, we have to make sure that we're putting out the right amount of nutrients to be able to make this work. Let me give you some other kinds of scenarios that we've been running into. We've really seen that heavily here in the Northeast. This is a field, a pasture, and up at the top of the landscape here, the hill here is actually completely dead. That was common Bermuda grass. I never knew that you could kill common Bermuda grass until last year. You can kill common Bermuda grass. And that's exactly what happened in this case. If you got up on top of that little ridge, you can see that this place was like a moonscape. It was very dead. And you can see that by judging the rocks here, it was very short, not very much growth there at all, and certainly no green growth out there in this whole area. It looked like it had been sprayed with Roundup, but it hadn't. We got to digging around a little bit. The county agent up in that area was looking and trying to identify what was going on, and they found sugarcane beetle grubs. The ground was just really fluffy with these grubs. But remember I said that there's a multitude of factors, and then there's one straw that breaks the camel's back. Well, this was the straw that broke the camel's back. There were several things going on in this field. This particular case was one of our best producers in the whole of the state. He wasn't having real problems with fertility. fertility was not necessarily the issue. In fact, if anything, it might have been too far the other way, and that was kind of the reason he was having so much grub problems. But what was going on here is we got to step back and look at the landscape a little bit. You see this hill up here? And you see the lower points in the elevation actually are green and growing. The reason being is that upslope area has very, very thin topsoil. In fact, there's no topsoil in this particular case, the higher points here. All of the topsoil is run down here. The great majority of that actually is now in the Atlantic Ocean or in the Gulf of Mexico somewhere. Not because of this producer's doings. This was done decades before, back when it was in cotton. So this doesn't really show up in years where we have good rainfall and good conditions. This shows up in our drought years. In this case, it was last summer. Just had gotten a shower to kind of regenerate this grass, but you can see this shallow root system up here is really what ultimately does it in. I want to come back to the root system here in just a little bit because our grazing management influences that more than anything else. This is what the leaf spot diseases look like. There are several different ones, and I don't want to go into all of the details on each one of those tonight, but there are several different ones, and they all have a common theme. Many times they are related to potash deficiency. We're not seeing as much of this damage in this part of the state as we do further south, but we're also seeing the stem borer, a bermudagrass stem borer. You can kind of see that some of these top end leaves here are curling up, they're brown, they're dead. It looks like it's been frosted, but it's in July or August. This is the effect of the bermudagrass stem borer. We've only seen this for the last 2 years. It's mainly a South Georgia problem, but when they've got it, it's a huge problem. And it's mainly affecting the finer stemmed bermuda grasses. So things like Alicia, even Tifton 44, but some of our coarser textured bermuda grasses aren't affected as badly by this. Russell is actually kind of marginally affected by that. So if you've got Russell, it's not as bad as some of the others anyway. Excuse me. And we're also having problems with spring dead spot, brown patch, a number of other diseases are kicking in here as well. So what do we do about diseases? Well, I've talked about potash, but one of the things that we can do to help fight off diseases is actually to burn off some of these fields. Burning is a practice that is a recommended practice. It does help in certain situations, particularly if you're battling leaf spot diseases. However, there are some negatives associated with burning off fields. One of the benefits, though, is that you do get some good weed control. You're able to get that field to green up a little faster. It releases some nutrients, which is really good, particularly if potash is limited. Decreases the weeds, I mentioned that, and definitely reduces the leaf spot disease pressure. However, we do have to realize that there are certain limits on how much we can burn and where we can burn out, particularly in and around the Atlanta area. Very risky, especially in, as we become more urban or suburban. We have a lot more risk, particularly for neighboring properties, and that fire getting away from us. Mentioned that burn bans and the total burn ban, and this varies from time to time. This map actually may be out of date, but like, for example, Elbert County is a little bit, in this particular instance, a little bit more easy to do this than even in this particular county. So there's a good publication out of Auburn University that covers this in detail. It's linked off of our website if you're interested in that. I'd be happy to share with you. Okay, let me just kind of end on a very sad note, I guess. It's not a matter of if, but a matter of when and how bad we're going to be suffering from drought. And unfortunately, we're in a situation, here we go again, of another round of drought. Now, this is last summer, all right? Last summer was about as bad as it gets. We certainly had another round of a very severe drought. This is where we stand just a couple of weeks ago, actually a week before last now. This coming Thursday, that'll be 2 weeks ago. It really hasn't changed that much. It'll be almost the exact same map if we look at it this week. This is this year. This is what it was this time last year. Okay? So my point is we're starting out further behind the 8 ball than what we were last year. This is this year and this is last year. We are in for some real challenges this year if we don't monitor and manage what we're doing. Now, first of all, what would it take to actually break this drought? What it would take to refill and recharge the soil, accounting for runoff and evaporation, transpiration, leaching down below the root zone. Well, this is a map that I pulled off the National Climatic Data Center's website. And this is the amount of precipitation that would be required to end a level -6 Palmer Hydraulic Drought Index. Well, what does that mean? That means as severe as the drought was last summer, or as severe as the drought was in 2007. How much rain would it require to end that level of drought? Not completely out of drought, but at least get us up to abnormally dry. Well, all these dark green areas that you see here, it would take in excess of 30 inches of rain in a period of 4 months to do that. Now, 30 inches of rain is about 2/3 of what, well, it's a little more than 2/3 of what we get on a per year basis. If we got 30 inches in 4 months, considering that our average monthly rainfall is 3.75 inches, or 3 3/4 inches, it would require double the normal rainfall for 4 consecutive months for us to get out of this drought. I don't know if you all read tea leaves different than I am, but it doesn't look like we're going to have 4 consecutive months of that kind of rainfall this coming summer. And we're continually going to fall behind. So my encouragement to you is to begin to think about ways to deal with this as we go forward. And not, even with cattle prices the way that they are, don't try to overstep what your land is capable of doing, or what your grass, for that matter, is capable of doing. Let's look at these different bermudagrass and tall fescue and whatnot. We have some really good water use efficient systems out there. Our forages are very efficient at using water. Part of this is because they put down root systems pretty deep, if we allow them to. And how do we allow them to? Well, if we don't overgraze, for one, or if we have soils that are capable of supporting that. Now, frankly, most of our soils that we have in the Piedmont area, we can't get roots to grow down that deep just because of the soils that we have. We're farming subsoil in many cases. So is it any wonder that we're losing stands?